Look at this, the MeidasTouch Brian Tyler Cohen collaboration that you've all been asking for. Brian Tyler Cohen, author of the new book, Shameless: Republicans' Deliberate Dysfunction and the Battle to Preserve Democracy. Make sure you buy that book right now. Brian, how are you?
Ben, at long last, we've made this thing happen. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I can't tell you how many comments I get.
Oh, I know. Trust me. I get it.
We're doing it. All right, let's show you this clip. Here's Donald Trump at this disastrous event in Montana talking about being called weird. Here, play this clip.
He said, well, think of that. Think of the things I just said. Then he said, I think JD Vance is weird. It's a word that they use. I think he calls me that too. No, we're not. We're very solid people. We want to have strong borders. We want to have good elections. We want to have low interest rates. We want to be able to buy a house. We want great education. We want strong borders. I think we're I think we're the opposite of weird. They're weird. You know what they do? They work with the press on coming up with a soundbite, just a soundbite. And every station that night, all the networks, CBS and ABC, NBC, they all said, oh, they were called weird. It's unbelievable. It's not a word that's really used too much in politics, but it's a terrible thing that they can do this. It's just a soundbite. No, JD Vance is a great patriot and a...
My, how the tables have turned. Brian Tyler Cohen, that was a disastrous event by Donald Trump, and he continues to melt down. What do you make of this current moment?
Yeah, I think what's especially interesting is how he kind of keeps pivoting that. He's pushing that soundbite off to JD Vance. He's like, they keep calling us weird, and I keep telling them JD is not weird. JD is definitely not weird. So he's just like continuing to like heap all of that criticism onto JD Vance. He's like, not me, it's definitely him. But he's not weird. But if he was, it would be him for sure. Look, I think what we're seeing is for the first time in as long as I can remember, Donald Trump is dissembling because he doesn't know how to deal with the situation that he's in. He's not running against Joe Biden as much as to his dismay, because that's all he's hoping to do throughout all of this time. He doesn't know how to deal with Kamala Harris. And his one virtue, which is his perceived strength, his strongman bona fides, are just completely going down the toilet at this point. I mean, he was never good at foreign policy or domestic policy or governing, speaking. All he had was those vibes, that toughness. And Kamala Harris is just cutting him down at his legs on a daily basis. And clearly, the dissembling is a testament to the fact that he doesn't know how to come back from that.
I wanted to show you that clip, not just because of the dissembling based on the word weird, but Donald Trump in the middle of that statement, as incoherent as it was, he listed things that he says that he is for, but in reality, he and the MAGA Republicans have done this deliberate dysfunction, and they've actually created the chaos at the border. Kill the border bill. Donald Trump meeting with foreign leaders like authoritarians like Viktor Orban to try to undermine our foreign policy. Donald Trump attacking the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Chairman Powell, to not lower interest rates. It seems across the board you have Donald Trump wanting deliberate dysfunction to hurt the people so a strong man could rise. And you look at red states, that seems to be a playbook that's used. And I know that's covered in detail in your book. So talk to us about that.
I mean, just to that point exactly. I mean, Donald Trump says that he wants education. You look at the red states that are just at the bottom of the list in terms of education. Really, the Republicans, where they have control, that is a playbook for what Republicans would do with unified control of government. And there are no positive outcomes that they can point to. There's no positive metrics they can point to, even in terms of families. I mean, you have JD Vance trying to attack Kamala Harris and any Democrats over being childless cat ladies. But when you look at families, when you look at maternal mortality rates, when you look at infant mortality rates, when you look at education rates, poverty rates for children, all of those rates lag blue states when you look at the red states where Republicans are in control. So when Republicans are given power, I say in the book that there is no greater abyss than what Republicans say versus what they do. And that's put on full display where Republicans actually have power here.
What about JD Vance taking that media tour over the weekend, accusing Democrats of engaging in name calling and schoolyard bullying? I saw one commentator say, was JD Vance next going to say, when they go low, we go high? I like the way you
Right.
put it slightly better. Crooked Hillary, Crazy Nancy Pelosi, Sleepy Joe, Coco Chow, Lion Ted, Ron DeSanctimonious, Bird Brain, Nikki Haley, Old Crow McConnell, Gavin Newscum, Pencil Neck Schiff, Pocahontas, Crying Chuck, and Kamabla would all like a word. They really have Shady Vance going with, oh, they're bullying us now? Really?
And I actually, this does harken back to the book, because a big part of the book, and actually why I wanted to write it, was Republicans have relied so long on their branding to present themselves one way, while in reality they act completely antithetically to that. So to this exact point, where Republicans are like, oh, we're going to be the people who show some restraint in our rhetoric here. The Republicans have done this for a long time, where they claim to be the party of personal responsibility, the party of family values, the party of states' rights, the party of the Constitution, of law and order, of the military, and everything they do in reality completely presents itself as antithetical to that very branding. But this is how they lend themselves cover. For example, they want to help themselves in this election by claiming that, oh, we're responsible stewards of the economy. And so Republicans, and that presents itself in the polls, by the way. Republicans still do a little bit better in the economy when you compare that polling against that of Democrats. But the reason I wanted to write this book was they derive so much benefit from this historical branding, from the days of Reagan, where they can still beat their chests as the party of personal responsibility in the military and fiscal responsibility. But in reality, that's not presenting itself at all. I mean, you just look at the economy, for example. In my entire lifetime, there has never been a Republican administration that's performed better than a Democratic administration. Never been a Republican administration that's added more jobs than a Democratic administration. Never been a Republican administration that's brought the unemployment rate down lower than a Democratic administration. Never been a Republican administration that's left office with better economic output than a Democratic administration. So they benefit from all of this historical branding, but they can't actually back it up. And so the point of writing this was to kind of expose these lies that they rely on so heavily, while presenting themselves well to the American people, who may be less informed about what they're actually doing.
Well, one of the things that you do, one of the things that we do, I think we've seen the media landscape that takes these slogans from the MAGA Republicans, and they use them, they normalize this behavior,
Totally.
and the American public aren't getting the data and information that they need. And what you've built, what we've been trying to build here. And, I think it's great to see a bunch of other step into this independent media space to try to get out the messages, to call out that deliberate dysfunction. How big of a part do you think it has been, though, that kind of the corporate media's traditional playbook is not made for the moment? Or is it even more nefarious than that the corporate media, through conglomerates owning these entities, are ultimately owned by billionaires? And unfortunately, if you look at the lessons of alliances between businesses and authoritarian regimes, the businesses get lured into believing that it's deregulatory environments and all of this, when in fact the authoritarian then destroys the businesses. But you see that historical pull there. What do you make of the current media environment?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're both pretty clear-eyed about the dangers that our media, that cannot meet the moment right now, is failing yet again to navigate the political process as it relates to Donald Trump. And they do benefit, by the way, from the prospect of Donald Trump being the president again. I mean, the media is a business just like any other business. Their goal is to make money, and they do that by getting eyeballs onto the screen, and nothing gets eyeballs onto the screen as far as they're concerned, as well as Donald Trump. And him being there for another 4 years would certainly help them. And so their goal as a business is not first and foremost protecting democracy. And we've seen that, by the way they comport themselves. Their goal is to make money for their shareholders in the way that any other business wants to make money for their shareholders. I think what independent media does is we recognize that because we're not propped up by any sponsors, we don't have shareholders that we have to deliver revenue for. our job can be what our job should be, what any press should be, which is protecting democracy. This is existential for the press, and that's the point that I don't understand. Because if this plane that we're all on goes down, that takes everybody with it. And what's the first thing to go in some type of authoritarian state or autocratic state? It is the free press, and we've seen that in history over and over and over again. And so I can't wrap my head around why they don't understand that if, again, to use that analogy, if the plane goes down, they're going down with it. But, I'm glad to see that more and more Americans are getting their news from progressive independent media, especially in the aftermath of what we've seen for so long, which is the right just dominating the independent media space, dominating it from the days of Rush Limbaugh to then Daily Wire, Daily Caller, Fox, OAN, Newsmax. They dominate podcasts. They dominate Facebook. For a long time, they've dominated YouTube. And I think to your credit and the credit of other creators in this growing independent media ecosystem on the left, we're really rebalancing the scales here. And for the first time, I believe TikTok is now showing more positive news for Kamala Harris and the Democrats than it is for Donald Trump. So taking back these spaces that Republicans have been able to co-opt and just own for so long is going to be the difference.
And look, Brian, you've been at the forefront of that as well. I mean, your YouTube channel was a pioneering YouTube channel in this space. It's why, it was so important for me to read Shameless, Republicans' Deliberate Dysfunction and Battle to Preserve Democracy, and why I want to recommend all our viewers to make sure they order it, because you've been in the trenches talking about these issues for a very long time, and getting out the truth matters. I mean, look, we talked about how all the propaganda had the public believing that Republicans were better on the economy. But just take a look at the poll that came out yesterday from the Financial Times, of all places, right? Who do you trust more about the economy? The fact that this is even close, Brian, is such a wild concept to me. But Vice President Kamala Harris is trusted more than Donald Trump on the economy. I mean, go figure. The Biden-Harris administration that resulted in the lowest unemployment, the high increased wages, one of the best economies in American history, versus the guy who tanked it. The people believe that Harris and Biden are doing a better job. But it takes getting the messaging out. And I think it also takes exposing Donald Trump, whatever he's doing. I mean, this meltdown, this psychotic breakdown, you and I sometimes, get accused in our titles of saying, oh, they're so hyperbolic, but I don't know how else to describe something like this. I'm just trying to use the words that fit the moment. When Donald Trump posts this and he goes, has anyone noticed that Kamala cheated at the airport and there was nobody on the plane and she AI'd it and showed a massive crowd of so-called followers, but they didn't even exist? What word are you and I supposed to use to describe it? I think the problem is corporate media trying to normalize that versus us calling that a psychotic meltdown.
Right. I mean, here's the thing. Here's the way to look at it. If Joe Biden or Kamala Harris did it, what would they call it? Because then it wouldn't be a stretch to have them say well, he might be deep in the throes of cognitive decline. He might be melting down. He's losing his mind. He's the guy's a lunatic, but that's what he is. And so it has basically, the right has figured out a way to game the refs in the media, where if you do deign to call it what it is, then they push back at you and say, oh, this is just the liberal media. And of course, the regular media, the mainstream media will say, well, we don't want to be called the liberal media. And so we're going to bend over backwards. We're going to overcompensate. We're going to kowtow to the right just so they know that we're not the liberal media. And maybe we'll curry favor with them. And of course, they never do. It's not like any Republicans or Donald Trump himself won't continue to call the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and all of the other regular outlets fake news, because they will. But still, the media is in pursuit of this elusive acceptance by the right, and it never comes, and still they continue to do it, and they continue to pretend that what's happening right now is normal, and it is not normal, and we cannot allow it to be normalized. And so, to your credit, to the credit of everybody in this progressive media ecosystem, good on us for continuing to hammer away at this, especially when we're seeing the media fall into the same exact trap that it did in 2016, where Donald Trump says insane stuff and, they continue to heap coverage on him. They barely talk about it anymore because, well, it's Donald Trump and that's just baked into the cake that's what's going to do, that's what he's going to do. But if a Democrat misplaces a modifier, then it's going to run front page for the next 3 days. And so that is that asymmetry at play. And I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that we completely turn that formula on its head and remind Americans on a daily basis exactly who Donald Trump is, because Ben, dude's a lunatic.
Dude is a lunatic. Everybody, make sure you get the book Shameless Republicans, Deliberate Dysfunction, and the Battle to Preserve Democracy, wherever books are sold. Order it right now. Shameless Republicans, Deliberate Dysfunction, and the Battle to Preserve Democracy. Brian Tyler Cohen, if I could have you on with me 10 times a day, as I told you before the interview starts, I would. And for those who want to know, Brian and I are actually close friends behind the scenes as well. And we've always been supportive of each other's works. And I'm really honored to have him on the channel, and what Brian's done. Not just in the YouTube space, but in really building this independent media landscape, deserves a lot of praise. Thanks, Brian.
Well, I appreciate it, Ben, and congratulations to what you and your brothers and your team over there at MeidasTouch have built. You guys are an inspiration, and I hope a lot of other people follow in your footsteps.
Well, yours as well. Thank you, everybody. Brian Tyler Cohen on the MeidasTouch YouTube channel. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 3 million subscribers. Have a wonderful one.
Real quick, Meta just changed their algorithm to suppress political content. Please follow our Instagram at MeidasTouch right now as we head towards 400,000 followers so you don't miss a beat.